Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Spritz.
This podcast is from a fan's perspective of the hit movie and musical Hairspray.
I'm Derek.
And I'm Mitch.
And this is
Behind the Spritz.
And we're back!
We sure are. On our last episode, you saw us talking about our film director and creator, John Waters. We talked about his childhood, and we're now going to the movies.
Yes. Where we left off was for John's birthday. His maternal grandmother gave him his very first 8mm Brownie movie camera.
I bet he was thrilled to get that.
Oh, yes. And, for that time, really, what a generous gift. 1963.
So back then, having, your own video camera, to go around and, film, whatever you see was very rare.
Yes.
And video cameras, I know at that time were not a big thing, for a household item versus a regular camera.
Yeah, and I know that, his parents had video cameras. There's footage of John when he was a little boy. So they were around, and I think his family was pretty well off. But yeah, for a 17-year-old kid in 1963 to have his own camera, pretty awesome. He didn't waste much time with going right into trying to get a film career started, because in about 1963, he started work on his first short film, which was called Hag in a Black Leather Jacket.
Hag in a Black Leather Jacket.
It's so John Waters.
I'm sure our viewers want to know what was the short film about.
Okay, so in this film, obviously, he got his friends to be in it. So he got his girlfriend at the time. This is not her real name, and I won't say her real name just for privacy reasons. But in his book, Shock Value, he names her Mona Montgomery. So that's what we're going to call her. Mary Vivian Pierce, we mentioned last time. And then his sister is in it. His mom plays the piano. And it was filmed in and around his parents' house. He called Dreamland Studios. His parents were very kind of buttoned up people, but they were always very, very supportive. I'm not 100% sure how they reacted to this one in particular. I'm sure there were moments that they were like, okay, what is happening?
Well, I'm sure because they were Catholic.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at that time, Catholics were very strict. This is how you should act. This is what you should be doing.
Yep.
But I know they've said John always felt himself as an outsider and was always big on the outsider, fighting for respect.
Yes.
And from the movies that he did that I saw, the way he would express that would be in the films.
Mm-hmm. So you asked what this film was about. So at the time, John didn't know what editing was, basically. So he thought you filmed chronologically, and whatever was filmed was the movie. I saw the movie about 10 or 11 years ago, and it is very rough, but it's so fascinating to watch as somebody who has heard about this movie for a long time. To be able to actually see it in front of me was amazing. It starts out with test shots and
wow.
Yeah, almost like he was just seeing what the costumes looked like or whatever. And it starts out with that.
So it basically shows us, behind the scenes, these are the costumes. This is what they're going to be doing in it. Yeah. And then we get to the actual presentation.
Yeah. And again, it's very rough around the edges. It's silent. And then he has music layered over it and sound effects and things. If you have to put a story together, it's basically about Mona Montgomery plays a ballerina, and she's a white woman. She meets a black man who lives in a trash can, a la Oscar the Grouch, I guess.
Yeah, so I was is he friends with Oscar?
Yeah, and they end up falling in love and getting married, and the officiant is a member of the KKK. And they end up getting married on the roof of John's parents' house. Where did he get that? It's right away.
Where did he think of this?
Right away. Super original, again, rough around the edges, but weird and entertaining. Very John Waters. He premiered it in a beatnik coffee house. And I believe some of the people involved weren't even allowed to go because it was in a certain part of town. So that was his first film. And then later that year was a very pivotal part in John's life. That is when he met a young kid that lived down the street from him named Glenn Milstead.
Which is Divine.
Which is Divine.
Yeah, they met in high school and they did a lot together. And then once he launched his career, Divine was known for playing, as John Waters said, alarming women.
Yes, alarming women.
Movies.
Yeah. John had seen Divine on the side of the road, like waiting for the school bus and things. And he always said that Divine would make his dad shudder. And he was just a boy. I mean, like, he was just a boy standing there.
Like, this would have been before he was known as Divine the Drag Queen.
Yeah. But as John said, his dad sensed the divinity lurking underneath, that it was ready to pop out.
Slowly but surely, like it was coming out of him.
Yeah. So he was introduced to Divine officially by another neighbor, Carol Wernig, and John was fascinated by Divine and his sort of flamboyant personality. Also, through Divine, he met some more friends like David Lockery, who ended up being sort of the male lead in a lot of his films that we'll get into. Around this time, this is where John, and kind of plays into Hairspray, or you can see the inspiration for how Tracy gets thrown into detention. But around his senior year, I believe, of high school, John was going to Calvert Hall College Preparatory High School, and he was actually not thrown in detention, but thrown out of the school for his hair being too long.
Yeah. I know back then, like they always check, how long your hair was, or like with the girls, how long your skirt is. In Hairspray, Tracy gets in trouble because of her hair.
Yep.
And because of that, she gets sent into detention. It's kind of funny how like those connections can make a story.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch, because John always said that really Tracy's him. And so just seeing those little nuggets throughout his life of what sort of inspired him. And obviously that was one of them. That last year of high school or so, he ended up going to Boys Latin in Baltimore. But then this point, he ends up meeting somebody who's very, very, very important to him. And still to this day, they often consider them each other's best friend. And that is Pat Moran.
Yeah, Pat Moran's well-known casting director.
And Divine introduced Pat and John, and just like, I mean, if John hadn't met Carol Wernig down the street, he wouldn't have met Divine. He wouldn't have met Pat. It's just so fortuitous they would find each other. I guess also birds of a feather flock together sort of thing, where it's like they'll find each other. Yeah,
like they always say, it's a small world.
Yeah. And then Pat ended up inviting John down to a bar called Mardik's Tavern. There was a barmaid there who was 24 years old by the name of Malcolm Soul. And for some reason, John's mom, again, being super, super supportive. His mom ends up dropping John off in the alley of this bar because she's just praying that he'll meet some friends. That's all she wants is for John to get in with the good crowd or whatever. And he runs into some kids, including George Figs and Seek Stoll, who will come into play here a little later. This is where John meets Malcolm, and he's instantly transfixed. He calls her the ultimate bohemian with bright red hair, interestingly enough. She was the one with this bright red hair at the time, and she wore white powder on her face. And she had a bunch of like fake eyelashes, like a really like look for the 60s. She always drew like an asterisk under her right eye. And immediately he's like, she needs to be the star of my next movie. John ends up graduating from high school. He always says barely. He barely graduated. John ends up enrolling in the University of Baltimore, and then ends up, because of good grades for a year, he ends up at New York University. Before he actually went to NYU is when, the summer before, he went to Provincetown, Massachusetts for the first time, which does become important in John's life. He's still, to this day, every summer he spends in Provincetown. But he and his girlfriend, Montgomery, they hitchhiked there. They were very enamored by it. They ended up staying in this tiny room on Bradford Street for 2 weeks. And then he met up with Seek Stoll, who I mentioned was one of the people that he met in the alley of Mardik's. And then, they stay there for 2 weeks. They're enamored by it. And they're pretty much like oh, we'll be back. He ends up at New York University, where basically he thinks it's a waste of time. You know, they're showing movies like Battleship Potemkin and all these pretentious movies. He just wants to go to these underground films and
wants to do his own
Warhol.
thing.
He wants to do his own thing. The one movie he always says that he wanted to see the most was like Olga's House of Shame and like stuff like that. Well, he ends up getting kicked out of NYU for smoking marijuana. And this was a big deal at the time. And they even wrote about it in a book, and it's called 1 in 7 Drugs on Campus. He's not named in this. I only know that it's him because he says, he mentions, I think in like some of it, like in This Filthy World and stuff, that he was written in this book called 1 in 7 Drugs on Campus. It ended up being very humiliating for his parents to have to come and pick him up. And apparently like the RA and the guards of the dorms were like, don't tell anybody. But John was like, I'm telling the Daily News.
I'm assuming John did tell the Daily News.
He did. Yes, he did. Because he didn't care and he wanted to kind of stick it to them. And
I always felt, you know, John has always had that personality, like in his life, like, this is what I like, this is what I'm doing, and this is what I'm showing. I think in life, we do tend to worry about what others will think about us based on doing something, and sometimes that can hold us back.
Yes.
But then it's like this, like the minute you let that go, like you realize this is something I'm doing for me.
Yeah.
You know, I have to make myself a priority.
Yeah. And you know, John is somebody that, like, the thing I most admire about him is, like you said, you know, so many of us, we do worry about what other people think. John is somebody that I have never gotten the impression at all. And some people fake it. They fake that they don't care. John is somebody that I truly believe he doesn't care. And that is so admirable. I mean, like, it, and that's what I love about him the most, is that he is so unique and he really doesn't care. And he knows that that's like his power. He moves back in with his parents. Basically, the dean of New York University is like, John needs extensive psychiatric treatment. And so his parents are like, okay, well, we got an appointment with the local psychiatrist. And this is around the time of the Vietnam War.
And I can imagine John's reaction about being the psych doctor. He's probably like, I don't need no psych doctor.
No. But he's like, okay, whatever. Like, I'll go with it. So because it's the Vietnam War, he does get induction papers in the mail for the draft, and he gives the papers to his psychiatrist.
Did John fear about getting drafted?
Oh, absolutely he did. And he tried everything not to. So he handed over those papers that he got, the induction papers, and he gave them to his therapist and said, can you please write me some sort of excuse so I don't have to be drafted? And the doctor says, no, I think the Army would actually be good for you. John is like, okay, well, I got to figure out something. So he ends up meeting with some recruits. They give him, you know, the forms and stuff, and he checks off every box he can check off. He checks off alcoholic, junkie, homosexual, bedwetter, all this stuff. He's like just so he can't get drafted. Like, they're going to be like, no,
I can see that, because I'm sure being drafted was the last thing on earth he wanted to happen to.
Absolutely. And they did end up just saying, okay, you're not fit for the Army. And so he's off, and they're like, okay, he never had to worry about that. So that didn't work out for his therapist or anybody who thought that the Army would be good for him. He ends up going back to Provincetown. He meets Seek Stoll, her sister, for the first time, Nancy Stoll. Do you know who that would be?
Would it be Mink Stoll?
Very good. Yeah. He ends up finding the name Mink Stoll. And so that's where they met for the first time, which was about, I think, the summer of 1966. He and Mink actually end up forming a friendship. They moved to New York City for a little bit. And Mink basically is terrified of the city. She's very intimidated by it. And so they don't live there for very long. They end up moving back to Baltimore. Now, this is where he starts work on his next film, which is The Roman Candles. He was inspired by Andy Warhol's The Chelsea Girls, which was triple projected. So it had 3 screens of different film reels of just random footage. I've seen this one as well. I saw it when I saw Hack in a Black Leather Jacket and the next film we'll talk about. But it's in color this time. And each time, Mona Montgomery actually stole, I believe she worked at like a business that sold cameras and equipment and film and things. And every time she stole film for John. And this time she stole color film. So they were able to film this in color. A bunch of his friends that were in Hack in a Black Leather Jacket and then that he met after, including Divine, including Mink Stole, were in this film. And this is the first time that Divine was named Divine and Mink Stole was named Mink Stole, except for at the time, she was called Mink Stole, the Precious Jewel.
The Precious Jewel?
Yeah.
Was this like Divine's first appearance as a drag queen?
Yes and no. I cannot remember if he was like in full drag ever in it. I do remember a shot where he's wearing like a turban, and I think he had like makeup on, and he's playing hide and seek and like in a yard, like in bushes and things. But he wasn't like necessarily the star at the time. It was Malcolm Soule was John's muse, and he thought, oh my gosh, she's shocking. But he always says that there is something about Divine in Roman Candles that people noticed, and people did notice Divine in it. And then he's like, okay, maybe I'll make
Divine
him,
like started performing that personality, like wanting to go to drag
something. Yeah, and there's something about that, and Divine did already.
Well, also kind of like having his name like changed to that Divine.
yeah, and the already Divine had dabbled in drag already, so that kind of all played into it too. But that film premiered at the Emmanuel Episcopal Church downtown. A reverend named Fred Hanna was, I mean, how amazing! In 1967. This local reverend meets John. He's enamored by him. He thinks he's real creative and charming. And he goes, yeah, come on in and we'll screen your movie. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, that is.
I mean, so progressive for 1967. So that film.
By this point, the word's starting to get out, like that he could, get even bigger.
He did 3 showings of Roman Candles at that church, and it was during the annual Flower Mart, and I believe it was May 10th, 1967. So I've seen a lot of times people said that it premiered in 1966, but John met Mink in the summer of 1966, so it couldn't have been until 1967. Then he's like, okay, we're hitting the ground running. We're going to make my next movie. He tries to make a movie, and he was always obsessed with The Wizard of Oz and The Wicked Witch of the West. But he wanted to make a movie called Dorothy, the Kansas City Pothead, or The Wizard of Oz Goes to Pot. He's named the. I've seen both of those names, but
like how John like is obsessed with those things, like kind of like give it a twist, like the side of these characters that you don't see.
Yes, exactly. And so he cast Malcolm Soule as the Wicked Witch of the West, and he actually cast Pat Moran as Dorothy. And he cast George Figgs, who was the friend that he met in the Alley of Mardix. He was cast as a Scarecrow, and Mink Stole was cast as Auntie M. And they started filming it. And the plan was that they were going to film it silently, because at the time, these were just silent cameras. There was no audio. And then he was going to try to record the dialogue on a separate tape recorder and then meld them together, basically play them at the same time to try to sync up the dialogue. He couldn't get it to work, and so they abandoned filming it. So they never finished it. I've only seen a few photos, and then there's like 2 clips that I've seen of Pat Moran running down a hill with her pigtails, and she has like a plastic duck as her Toto. And then George Figs up on the the corn stalks as the Scarecrow, and that's about it. That's all that really exists of that. Again, summer comes around, going to Provincetown. He meets some more friends. He sees a local like a local candy store called the Penny Patch, and they sold candy shaped like lipstick, and the slogan was "The makeup you eat up." He meets a new friend, a girl from Sweden by the name of Marina Maline, and so he asked her, come back to Baltimore, star in my next film, eat your makeup," which of course he got from that slogan. He moves out of his parents' house for the first time. He moves into an apartment on 25th Street in Baltimore with Marina Maline and his friend Bob Skidmore. Now this is his next short film, but each one gets a little bit more elaborate. So the first one was 17 minutes long. The next one, I think, was around 40 minutes, Roman Candles. But there wasn't much of a story with that one. This time, there is a more cohesive story, and he is starting to edit these movies and get a story involved. He ends up buying a new camera, this time a 16 millimeter. So he went up from an 8 to a 16.
So he's progressing now. So like he saw how he could, make these movies and wanted to make them bigger.
Yes, exactly. And so they start work on filming Eat Your Makeup. And so Marina is going to be in this with the usual cast. So he has Malcolm Soule, David Lockery, Divine, Mary Vivian Pierce, Mona Montgomery, George Figs, Bob Skidmore, all the same people, and a few other friends here and there. This one was basically about Malcolm Soule played a governess who kidnapped models and made them eat their makeup. And basically she starved them and only gave them makeup to eat. That's basically what the movie's about. This was the first time that Divine really, really stood out because he played Jackie Kennedy in a recreation of the Kennedy assassination.
So this is when he was starting to perform in drag.
Yes. And full drag this time. And this was only, I think, 4 years after the Kennedy assassination. So this was shocking at the time. And he was filming it in his parents' neighborhood. I mean, like do you know how his mother reacted to it, knowing like how like uptight she could? Well, I don't think she was too happy about it, but I do know that Divine's mother found, the Jackie Kennedy, that pink suit that she wore, that famous pink suit. Divine had, the one that he was wearing for the movie, and it was covered with fake blood, and he wadded it up, put it in the trunk of the car. His mom found it and goes, "What is this?" And Divine panicked and goes, "I am Jackie Kennedy." Like, that's all he could think.
Like he just said that, "I am Jackie Kennedy.
I am Jackie Kennedy." Yeah, that's what he said. This was not the son that she always knew, because he was always a shy kid, and he was starting to change, and she was scared. She wasn't sure what was going on with him. This was risky things that they were doing, but John knew that it would get them attention if they did these shocking things that nobody had ever done before. So he ends up entering the film into a student competition at like an art college, and the judges start watching it, and they're like no, and they turn it off in the middle. And Reverend Hannah, who had been letting John premiere his films, he starts getting calls saying, you can't show this movie. John ends up screening the film at the church because Reverend Hannah refused to not let him do it, which is awesome. That he was still all, like, hey, this is expression, we got to support this kid.
Because the way John would always express something would be in his films.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, he decides to take donations this time instead of charging for tickets. It ends up making less money than Roman Candles did because of this. And he thinks that it was because of how offensive some of the material was. Yeah. No newspapers came to review it or advertise it or anything like that. So it was a step forward with his like the technical stuff of this film, but it was kind of a
Do you
step
think
backwards.
this was also a step of how edgy he could be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this was definitely the first time that he was. I mean, there were things in Roman Candles and Hagen of the Black. I mean, like obviously the KKK
Right.
and that kind of thing.
Would you say like the JFK one was really starting to push it?
Yeah, I would think so. Now, tragically, not long after this movie, so that was in February of 1968, April 4th, 1968, Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and there were major riots that happened in Baltimore and all over the country. The day after Martin Luther King Jr. passed away, Malcolm's soul ended up passing away. John's muse ends up passing away at 27 years old, and they said natural causes. And John remembers having to literally fight their way through these riots and on the streets to get to her funeral. It was just a big shakeup for John, this young woman that he thought was going to be his big star, like she's going to be in my movies forever and in everything. And suddenly she's taken at just 27 years old, just suddenly, just absolutely devastating. Now, how do you top what John's been doing? Well, we got to make a feature film. So this is his first feature film, which was also silent. John has said that this movie that I'm about to talk about was 90 minutes, but it really should be 10 minutes. He said he really stretched it out. And it is, I mean, when you watch it, there's a lot of padding. There's a lot of padding, shots that go on forever and ever and ever. But it's called Mondo Trasho.
Mondo Trasho.
Mondo Trasho. And in the fall of 1968, they start filming that. He convinced his dad to lend him $2,000 to make it. Basically, one of how he ended up doing that.
Back in the 60s, $2,000, that's... I mean, yes, that's considered a lot of money these days, but especially at that time.
Oh, yeah. And very generous of his dad. But John was always a salesperson, and he was able to convince his dad by saying, hey, I didn't go to college, really. So he's like, I mean, you would have helped pay for my college. This is going to invest in my career. I will pay you back. And so his dad was like, okay. And he treated it like an investment, and he gave him $2,000. And he went to a guy at Quality Film Labs called Pete Gary for some more filmmaking advice. And so he's really pushing, he's really trying each time to make a big step up. And so he, with Malcolm's soul passed away, he thinks, okay, Divine is my new star. People really remember him now for Eat Your Makeup when he played Jackie Kennedy. Mm-hmm. He's my star. He's my new muse. And so he has the idea to dress him up as a Jane Mansfield type, who was a big star at the time, a big bombshell, and somebody John always sort of admired. And I'm pretty sure he always said that he preferred her over Marilyn Monroe because they were always kind of compared. And, having Divine play a Jane Mansfield type there's a funny juxtaposition there. November 1968, John, David Lochary, Mink Stoll, Bonnie Pierce, Divine, and a friend, Mark Isherwood. They headed over to Wyman Park at Johns Hopkins University's campus to film a scene in the movie in which Mark Isherwood is hitchhiking, and Divine is driving a red 1959 Cadillac Eldorado with the top down. Driving, sees Mark Isherwood hitchhiking, and she imagines him naked. Now, obviously, in order to film this, Mark has to get naked. Well, a security guard ends up seeing Mark drop his robe.
Oh my.
And they get they're able to get a couple of shots in, and security guard comes up, starts screaming at them. He calls the police, and they go on the lam, so to say. They go on the lam, yes, and they all make a run for
another
it.
Reference there, going on the lam.
Yeah. Yeah. And they end up making a run for it. Divine's driving around with Mark in the passenger seat, still naked, I believe, or at least has a robe on. in drag, running around. The cops cannot find Divine, and John
Sounds
always
like someone else we know.
yeah.
See, like this references.
Uh-huh. Yeah, sounds very familiar. So they end up driving around. John always jokes that, that really doesn't say much for the Baltimore Police Department that, Divine's in this red car, dressed in drag, with a naked man in the passenger seat. The cops can't find him. So they do end up getting found. Divine does not end up getting arrested. Mark gets arrested. John gets arrested, David, everybody ends up getting arrested basically who was there except for Divine. And so basically the cops think that they're making a porno. And so they have to basically prove that they're not pornographers. This is not a pornographic film. So John uses the film that he decides to show them that he's made as Hag in a black leather jacket. And John always says that he thinks that the police were a little disappointed when they figured out that they weren't pornographers, so that they didn't get to watch some pornographic films.
So then after that was basically like, you're free to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, they did end up going to trial. I believe the judge was named Solomon Liss. He does end up dropping the charges, and he reads them this poem about going behind the door and sinning no more and things like that. So Fred Weisgall of the ACLU offers the judge 2 complimentary tickets to the premiere of Mondo Trasho, which
kind
the
of
judge,
like a way to get him out.
which the judge refuses, which is not a surprise.
Course.
So they end up completing Mondo Trasho, and it premieres at the Emmanuel Episcopal Church with Fred Hanna. John gives away a door prize for a dinner for 2 at the Little Tavern, which was like this little teeny tiny burger place. It was like a greasy diner, tiny little place with these greasy burgers and stuff like that. And Cookie Mueller ends up winning that. Spoiler alert, she ends up being an actor in some of John's films. He loves her personality, and he's like, yeah, she's going to be in my movies. John meets some more friends. After this, he's just collecting these people, these creative people around Baltimore. Come work on my movies, and they're all art.
He was basically this. Anybody he could find, be like, you.
Yeah, and he's just like, yeah, come on.
I know one of his producers said that John was always surprising them with his casting. Like she said, he could get anybody.
Yep.
And if they were in, they'd say yes. Now the silence is gone. The feature is on.